The warning should have made me leave. Instead, it made me stay. She stood in the doorway of her apartment with tired eyes, a half-finished cup of tea in her hands, and a vulnerability she clearly wasn't used to showing. The city lights spilled through the windows behind her, painting soft gold shadows across the room. For a moment she looked as though she wanted to say something else, something bigger, but all she managed was a quiet confession. She warned me that she got attached fast. And somehow, without thinking, I answered that I was staying tonight. That was the moment everything changed. Before we begin, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of love that arrives when you least expect it, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything. I was 32 when I met Claire. She was 45. 13 years older than me. Most people noticed the age difference immediately. They saw the numbers before they saw the people. They saw assumptions before they saw reality. But life has a strange way of introducing us to exactly who we need when we're least prepared for it. I met Claire during the worst year of my life. A year earlier, I had lost my father. 6 months after that, my engagement ended. 3 months later, I lost the job I had spent nearly a decade building toward. Everything I thought was permanent had disappeared. I moved into a small apartment across town because it was all I could afford. Most evenings were spent staring at walls, pretending I was adjusting to change when really I was just trying to survive loneliness. Claire lived down the hall. The first thing I noticed about her wasn't her beauty. It was her sadness. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that settles into someone's eyes after years of carrying more than they tell people about. We crossed paths in elevators and hallways for weeks before we had our first real conversation. She was carrying too many grocery bags one rainy evening. One bag split open. Oranges rolled everywhere. Without thinking, I knelt to help gather them. She laughed. A genuine laugh. The kind that sounds rusty because it hasn't been used enough. For some reason, that moment stayed with me. After that, we started talking. Short conversations became longer ones. Coffee turned into dinners. Dinners became walks. Walks became hours spent sitting on apartment balconies discussing everything from childhood dreams to regrets neither of us had ever shared with anyone else. She told me about her divorce. A marriage that lasted 16 years before collapsing under years of emotional distance. No dramatic betrayal. No scandal. Just two people slowly becoming strangers. She told me how terrifying it felt to start over in her 40s. How lonely birthdays felt. How difficult it was watching friends build families while she sat alone wondering whether her best years had already passed. I told her about my father. How losing him felt like losing a piece of my foundation. How every major decision afterward felt heavier because I couldn't call him anymore. I told her about my broken engagement. About trusting someone completely and watching that future disappear overnight. Somehow, our wounds recognized each other. Not because they were identical. But because they both hurt. Weeks became months. The friendship deepened. Neither of us acknowledged what was happening. Maybe because we were scared. Maybe because it felt safer pretending it was friendship. Maybe because the age difference sat quietly between us like an unspoken question neither of us wanted to answer. Then one evening changed everything. A thunderstorm rolled through the city. Power flickered. Rain slammed against windows. I found myself at Claire's apartment sharing tea and conversation while lightning illuminated the sky outside. The storm lasted hours. The conversation lasted longer. That was when she finally looked at me differently. Not as a friend. Not as a neighbor. As something more. The realization terrified both of us. She stared down at her tea and admitted something she'd clearly been holding back for weeks. She told me she got attached fast. She said it almost apologetically. Like it was a flaw. Like she was warning me before I discovered it myself. What she didn't know was that I had already become attached too. I just hadn't been brave enough to say it. So I told her I was staying. Not because of the storm. Not because it was late. Because for the first time in years, being near someone felt like being home. The silence afterward felt endless. Then she smiled. And suddenly neither of us felt quite so alone anymore. The relationship that followed wasn't easy. Real love rarely is. The first challenge came from everyone around us. Friends questioned my intentions. Some assumed I was going through a phase. Others suggested I was looking for someone to replace the stability I'd lost. Claire faced even harsher judgment. People whispered. They wondered what a woman her age was doing with someone younger. They assumed she was desperate. Some implied she should know better. The comments hurt. Especially because they came from people who claimed to care. But none of those people were present during the quiet moments. They weren't there when Claire sat beside me through panic attacks after losing my job. They weren't there when she spent hours helping me rewrite resumes and prepare for interviews. They weren't there when she held my hand during the anniversary of my father's death because she knew it would be difficult. And I wasn't there because she needed saving. I was there because she mattered. I was there because her laughter made difficult days easier. Because her voice calmed storms inside me. Because every version of my future looked brighter when she was standing in it. The second challenge came from Claire herself. Years of disappointment had convinced her happiness never lasted. Whenever things felt too good, she became afraid. Afraid I would leave. Afraid I would wake up one morning and realize I wanted someone younger. Afraid she was borrowing happiness that would eventually be taken back. Sometimes fear made her pull away. Not because she wanted distance. Because she wanted protection. I understood that fear because I carried my own. After enough loss, people stop expecting good things to remain. One winter evening, we argued. Not about age. Not about commitment. About vulnerability. Claire admitted she kept waiting for the relationship to end. Waiting for disappointment. Waiting for proof that her fears were correct. I remember looking at her through tears and realizing something important. Love isn't about convincing someone they're safe. It's about proving it repeatedly until they start believing it themselves. So I stayed. Not just that night. Every night afterward. I stayed through difficult conversations. Through insecurities. Through fears. Through uncertainty. I stayed when it would have been easier to walk away. Because commitment isn't proven when things are easy. It's proven when things aren't. 2 years passed. Life slowly rebuilt itself. I found meaningful work again. Claire began smiling more often. The sadness that once lived permanently in her eyes started fading. Not disappearing entirely. Just making room for hope. Then came another challenge neither of us expected. Claire's mother became seriously ill. The diagnosis arrived suddenly. Hospital visits became routine. Sleep became rare. Stress became constant. I watched the strongest woman I'd ever known struggle beneath the weight of anticipatory grief. There were days she barely spoke. Days she cried in parking lots. Days she questioned whether she could survive losing another person she loved. So I did the only thing I knew how to do. I showed up. Every appointment. Every late-night phone call. Every difficult conversation. Not because I had solutions. Because presence matters. Sometimes love isn't fixing pain. Sometimes it's refusing to let someone face it alone. When her mother eventually passed away, Claire collapsed into my arms and cried harder than I'd ever seen anyone cry. The kind of grief that shakes your entire body. The kind that leaves you breathless. That night, I held her for hours. No speeches. No advice. Just love. Just presence. Just staying. Months later, after the worst of the grief had passed, Claire admitted something. She said she'd spent most of her life believing love was measured by grand gestures. Expensive gifts. Perfect words. Big romantic moments. But she realized real love was much simpler. It was who remained when life became difficult. Who answered calls at 3 in the morning. Who sat beside hospital beds. Who stayed. Years after our first conversation in that apartment hallway, I proposed. Not at a fancy restaurant. Not during a vacation. Not in front of a crowd. I proposed in our living room. The same room where we'd spent countless evenings talking about life. The same room where she once warned me she got attached too fast. I told her attachment had never been the problem. The problem was that she spent years giving her heart to people who didn't know how to hold it. Then I asked her to spend the rest of her life with me. She cried before she answered. The happy kind of tears. The healing kind. The tears of someone finally allowing themselves to believe they deserve happiness. And she said yes. Today, when people ask about our relationship, they still notice the age gap. Some always will. But we've learned something important. Love doesn't measure years. It measures connection. It measures trust. It measures the willingness to remain when remaining becomes difficult. The truth is that Claire wasn't older than me. Not in the ways that mattered. We were simply two people carrying different histories. Two wounded hearts finding comfort in each other. Two lonely souls discovering that healing sometimes arrives disguised as another human being. Before we reach the end of this story, I have a special request. Please comment below and tell us where you're watching from and whether you've ever experienced a second chance that changed your life. Stories like this remind us that hope exists even after heartbreak. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who believes love has an expiration date, and subscribe for more emotional stories. Your engagement helps these messages reach people who may need them most. Sometimes I think back to that stormy night. To the warning. To the fear in Claire's eyes. To the moment she admitted she got attached fast. What she didn't realize was that attachment wasn't weakness. It was courage. It was the willingness to care deeply despite previous pain. The willingness to love despite disappointment. The willingness to open your heart again after life gives you every reason to keep it closed. And maybe that's the lesson hidden inside this story. The people worth keeping are rarely the ones who promise they'll never hurt us. They're the ones who prove, day after day, that they'll stay when life hurts anyway. Because in the end, love isn't found in perfect timing. It's found in presence. It's found in loyalty. It's found in ordinary moments that become extraordinary because of who shares them with us. And sometimes, the most beautiful chapter of your life begins the moment someone says they're afraid of getting attached. And you decide you're staying anyway. Thank you for listening.